Before we start this video, here are some historical facts about the MVP. As of this video, only 10 players in NBA history have won the award when their team was lower than the second seed in their conference. Of these 10 occurrences, it was won as the third seed 5 times, 1 time as the fourth seed, 3 times as the sixth seed, and 1 time their team missed the playoffs. Throughout NBA history, over 80% of the time, the winner of the MVP is on a team with a top 2 seed in their conference. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and in this video, I'm gonna try and justify why these 10 times it was reasonable for the player to win MVP despite being lower than the 2 seed. Alright, get ready for a doozy. Without further ado, let's begin. 1956, Bob Pettit. For a video like this, it makes sense to go in chronological order. The first year the NBA introduced the MVP award, funny enough, it was won by a player on a team with a losing record. The St. Louis Hawks went 33-39, and they were the third seed in the West, but there were also a total of 8 teams in the NBA at this point. I'm not gonna pretend I'm an expert on this era of basketball, and there aren't really any advanced stats you can find. But Bob Pettit led the league in points per game. He finished second in rebounds a game, first in total field goals made, first in free throws made. Overall, he was considered the NBA's best player that year, and that's why he won MVP. Since this was the very first MVP, people did not have any sort of criteria or precedent for who deserves to win it. But in the years following, everyone quickly realized, no matter how good a player is, team success should be the most important criteria. 1975, Bob McAdoo. It wouldn't be until nearly 20 years later when another third seed won the MVP. When Bob McAdoo won the award, he not only averaged 34 and 14, but he revolutionized how centers played the game. Previously, it was simple. Get the ball near the basket, back him down, and score in the post. But McAdoo, he was arguably the NBA's first stretch big man, the first center who had a consistent jump shot and was as agile as a guard. That's why fans around the league watched him in awe. He was doing stuff nobody has ever seen before from a guy of his size. And he led the Buffalo Braves to relevance, a relatively new expansion team at the time. Not just that, but the 2 Eastern Conference teams with better records, the Celtics and Bullets, who both won 60 games, they didn't have a single player who had a season that was anywhere close to what McAdoo accomplished. McAdoo's MVP was symbolic of individual dominance, combined with him single-handedly leading a franchise into prominence. 1976, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The second time in history when a player won MVP on a team with a losing record. The first time this happened on a team that missed the playoffs. The Lakers went 40-42, and Kareem still won MVP. However, this season was kinda wonky in more ways than one. Back then, the top 2 teams of each division were guaranteed to qualify for the playoffs. This meant the Milwaukee Bucks and Detroit Pistons, the 2 best teams in the Midwest Division, both made the playoffs, despite having records that were even worse than the Lakers. The Lakers, being just the 4th best team in the Pacific Division, they missed the playoffs. This also happened to be an incredibly balanced MVP race, with Kareem barely winning it with just 28% of the first place votes. Not to mention, just like the previous year with Bob McAdoo, the 70s were a dark age of the NBA. It was the decade with the least amount of talent, and most critics agreed it was the worst decade of basketball ever. The top-seeded teams did not captivate the crowd like Kareem and his individual play. 1979, Moses Malone. The justification for Moses winning it this year was, well, the records of each playoff team in both conferences were quite close. The Houston Rockets, who used to be in the East back then, won 47 games, tied for the 3rd best record in the conference, and only 1 game behind the 2-seed Spurs. The young Moses came into the league and immediately became recognized as arguably the greatest rebounder in history. At such a young age, too. To give you some context, the dude led the league with over 17 boards a game. That was almost 5 more than the second-place finisher. In total, he grabbed 400 more rebounds than the next most player, and nearly double the offensive rebounds. This is what made him the GOAT rebounder. He literally averaged over 7 offensive boards per game. Before Moses, we've never seen a guy who attacked the glass with this level of tenacity. Additionally, he averaged like 25 points a game, not too shabby. The Rockets in the previous season won only 28 games. But over the offseason, they saw the potential in the young center, so they decided to run the offense through Moses. As a result, they won almost 20 more games than before, as Moses ascended into superstardom. Erving had quite the impressive season as well, as he led the league in scoring, and the Spurs won one more game than the Rockets. But Erving also has been great for a long time, whereas Moses came in and kinda came out of nowhere to shock everybody with the way he played. We all know MVP is a narrative-based award, and the headlines back then were all about Moses. 1981, Julius Erving. This year is kind of an exception. The Sixers won 62 games, tied with the Boston Celtics for the best record in the entire league. Due to the stupid division rules and tiebreakers and all that stuff, the Sixers were the third seed. Either way, it was a super tight MVP race between him and Larry Bird. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this was the closest MVP race in NBA history, or maybe the second closest. 1990 was pretty close too. Regardless, it could have gone either way. It wasn't a surprise that Dr. J won it, and no one's gonna argue against that. 1982, Moses Malone. Is it weird that Moses showed up on this list twice? Well, this time it was kinda polarizing. The Rockets were the 6th seed, now in the Western Conference, but they tied with two other teams with 46 wins. The best regular season team that year was the Boston Celtics, and while Larry Bird was amazing, the Celtics' success was seen more as a team effort. Same with the Lakers, as both Bird and Magic were still new to the NBA, and they led a balanced attack on offense. Moses, on the other hand, put up absolutely mind-boggling numbers, 31 and 15, while the rest of his team that year was atrocious. His best teammate was a 36-year-old Elvin Hayes, who should have retired a few years ago. It's a miracle that this team even made the playoffs to begin with. Though at this time, the 6th seed was the lowest seed in the playoffs, basically the equivalent of the 8th seed today. We've seen it today where players with otherworldly seasons have won MVP, despite their teams being a lower seed, like Westbrook or Jokic. You have to have a historic impact on the game to win it this way, and Moses did. It's also because Moses led the Rockets to the finals in the previous year. That was still fresh on everyone's mind, and that probably got him some votes too, even though it shouldn't. I mean, it was a different season. 1988, Michael Jordan. The first of MJ's 5 MVPs came in 1988. The Bulls won 50 games, but this season, there were 6 different teams with a better record than them. 4 of them were in the West. That just speaks for Jordan's individual dominance. It was more than just his team's record. Everyone and everything was crazy about Jordan. People were literally calling him the greatest player they've ever seen, and he was only 24 years old. Imagine an era where Bird and Magic were in their primes, and their teams were dominating. Yet, this young player on the Bulls was the guy everyone wanted to see. Narrative plays a strong part in the MVP discussion, as you already know. And critics used to say Bird or Magic should have won it, cause they play winning basketball and make their teammates better. That was a common belief at the time, but it was also kinda contrarian. Jordan's season was far superior across all advanced metrics. He led the league in win shares per 48 minutes by a mile, and he won Defensive Player of the Year in the same season. He became the first player ever to win both MVP and DPOY in the same season. It was rightfully deserved. 1999, Karl Malone. Now, the Jazz this year, they were the 3rd seed, but their 37-13 record was tied with the Spurs for the best record in the league. But of course, the division rules strike again. I feel like even though the Jazz had the best record too, this MVP was quite controversial. For one, his numbers were one of the worst of any MVPs ever, and it was Malone's worst season in a decade. The runner-ups were Alonzo Mourning and Tim Duncan in a very close race. The thing is, this was quite the unique season. It was the lockout season, shortened to only 50 games, but also the offense dropped significantly across the league. I think this lockout caused a lot of players to slack off and not practice as much, cause they didn't know if there was even gonna be a season. It wasn't just Malone's numbers that dropped off, everyone's did. The efficiency was much worse compared to the years before and after. In hindsight, people say Tim Duncan should have won it cause the Spurs won the title, but in the regular season, it could have gone either way. Malone got some brownie points cause he was pretty old at this point, but still very good. In fact, even to this day, he's still the oldest player to ever win the award. At that age and being able to perform like he does, I think he got a lot of extra votes because of that. 2017 Russell Westbrook. Oh man, here it comes. The 2017 MVP campaign was headlined by two players, Russell Westbrook and James Harden. Harden's team had the better record, and when it comes to pure numbers, they were quite similar. But Harden was far more efficient, with a 61% true shooting percentage compared to Westbrook's 55%. Of course, the biggest dilemma was, are we really gonna give the MVP to a 6 seed just because he averaged a triple-double? Which, by the way, Harden was quite close too. He was 2 rebounds off from a triple-double. Does that make up for the fact that the Rockets won 8 more games? Still, it was a historic moment. It was the first time a player averaged a triple-double since Oscar Robertson in 1962. Plus, when the MVP race is this close, every little thing matters. Towards the end of the season, Westbrook was going off. From February 26th until April 9th, Westbrook averaged a staggering 34.8 points a game, with nearly 11 rebounds and 11 assists. Capped off with a 50-point, 16-rebound, 10-assist performance against the Denver Nuggets, including a game-winning buzzer beater that knocked him out of the playoff race. Westbrook finished the season so strong, the narrative shifted permanently in his favor. I am one of those guys who preferred Harden to win MVP that year. Despite that, I will not discredit what Westbrook was able to accomplish. It did, however, set a precedent that some folks might not like. Which brings us to 2022 Nikola Jokic. I don't think there was much pushback on Jokic winning his second MVP in this season. Jokic, on an individual level, was far ahead of anyone else this season. In terms of win shares, scoring efficiency, box plus minus, he led the Nuggets to 48 wins without Jamal Murray or Michael Porter Jr. Their second and third best players were injured the entire year. Will Barton was taking the second most shots per game on this team. That's how bad this Nuggets roster was, and that was the argument for why Jokic deserved it over Embiid or Giannis. Those guys had a far better supporting cast than Jokic did. Plus, just like Westbrook, Jokic had an incredible late-season push. From March 6th until April 7th, Jokic averaged over 32 points a game, over 13 rebounds, nearly 8 assists on 63% from the field. This is what sealed the deal. And despite the team's record, you can't overlook how hard he carried this abysmal roster. Anyway, that's all, folks. Oh wait, did I forget someone? It looks like from all the reports, Joel Embiid is going to win the 2023 MVP, and the Sixers are the 3rd seed in the East. It's been the most polarizing MVP race I've seen in a long time, and I think this time, he certainly deserves the MVP. What do you guys think? Thank you all so much for watching, I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time.